So it's Chuck from Gaming Nexus, and I'm here with...
I'm Sam Roberts, and I'm the Festival Director for IndieCade, the International Festival of Independent Games.
So IndieCade's gotten huge this year. Can you talk about some of the titles that are out here and how many games you've actually got?
Yeah, so we're showing just over 30 games. We're showing a ton of great stuff. A big focus here at the IndieCade booth is on diversity and innovation. We're trying to show the new, exciting stuff that's coming up that we think is going to influence the industry or be new game genres or be the exciting stuff that's coming down the pipeline in a little while. So one of the big themes to me of the past few years of independent development has been a real focus on multiplayer and different ways we're approaching that, both when you're looking at esports of the huge variety and the small variety. A ton of local multiplayer games have been showing up in IndieCade and other independent festivals the past few years. So this year we have a couple of really neat takes on that I'm interested in. We're showing a game called Close Castles. Close Castles is designed by a company called Servo, which is Asher Vollmer, and he is also the designer of Threes, which is a great iPhone game that came out earlier this year, just won an Apple Design Award. But Close Castles is a local multiplayer tower defense game. Really simple graphics, it's up to 4 players simultaneously, and Asher's only on an early prototype, which we're showing here in the booth. But one of the things I'm excited about with this local multiplayer is where for the first few years it was all like sort of sports games or traditional multiplayer, like sort of arena-style shooting games, we're starting to see people take that local multiplayer idea and really put it on other genres, different ways of playing where you can still play cooperatively or competitively with friends. But then we also have some really neat twists on multiplayer. So there's a game in the booth called Choice Chamber. It's designed by Studio Bean, which is a guy named Michael Molinari. Studio Bean's actually IndieCade alumni. Their first game, Basketball, was a nominee 3 years ago, and last year they had a game called Sound Dodger Plus that was at E3 and at our night games. But this game is called Choice Chamber, and Choice Chamber is a single-player platforming style experience played on Twitch TV, and everyone who's watching in the audience can type things in, and their language will actually appear in the level and change the level so that they can give extra tools to the player to make it easier, or they can add extra challenges to make it harder. So it becomes this one versus many sort of community tug-and-pull multiplayer experience. Likewise, we have 2 interesting games, one called Tetrageddon Games, and Tetrageddon is sort of a collection of small pop play experiences. The closest analog might be something like WarioWare. But the Tetrageddon games have some weird little cultural commentary in them. They use some unique art styles, but everything in them is Creative Commons or open sourced. And the tools for fiddling with them are provided right there where you can play the game. So the game is actually encouraging players who play it to say, oh, I liked this art and this mechanic and this thing, and I'm going to throw those together in a new mini game which I can upload into the suite. So it's asking the community to participate in this development. Likewise, we have a game called Please Be Nice that's also a single player experience, but when you finish a level, you get to add a feature that the next person who plays the level has to deal with or utilize while playing the game. So this way that indie developers are looking at multiplayer, looking at engaging a larger audience, engaging community, are really interesting to me right now. It's one of the things we're excited about showing here in the booth. So we have some other multiplayer stuff. We have a cool game called Paparazzi where you are a celebrity or the paparazzi. It's a 1v1 game, and the celebrity's trying to avoid having pictures taken, and the paparazzi's taking pictures, and you win by taking a ton of pictures or by escaping. There's Project Hera, which is a cooperative competitive game. It's 4 players, it's a diamond heist, and you're either cops or thieves, and you're working with your team to beat the other team and pull off the heist or prevent the heist. And then we have a ton of much more traditional single-player experiences. So Below from Capybara Games is in here. It's a beautiful, amazing sort of adventure game, basically. I think it's coming to PC and Xbox later in the year. Cappy is also IndieCade alumni. Their games Super Brothers, Sword and Sorcery, and Super Time Force both won awards at IndieCade in the past. We're showing a wonderful game called Elegy for a Dead World by a man named Ichiro Lamb, Dijoban Games, and he's collaborated with a music studio that I've forgotten the name of, but we will send you in the materials. And that game is like sort of a poetic interaction game. It's like an exploratory game, but it has very art-influenced visuals, and you interact with the world by sort of putting text into it. So again, like what we're looking at here is new approaches, new mechanics, new ways of engaging the audience, and we bring those here to the E3 show floor, both to share them with the general public, who we think is a little tired of some of the same games being shown over and over, and also to reach the industry to say these are the kinds of cool things you guys can be looking at for the next projects you're choosing to take as the indie projects on Sony, or even to invest in and build to larger levels.
What do you kind of attribute, I mean, indie games have become huge over the last few years. I mean, they've been kind of one of the centerpieces of Sony's experience. Microsoft's had to launch an entire new ID at Xbox program to kind of keep up. Why do you think we're seeing so much focus on indie development now?
Well, I think it's actually a combination of a lot of factors. So one thing that people don't talk about enough is that there's a generation now coming of age who video games have always been a part of their experience. They grew up with Super Nintendos, they've always had video games, so it's natural for them to think to express themselves in that way. So you just have a bunch more people who are actually interested in making games, which means there's more games being made. Accompanying that, though, you have an increase in programs teaching game design. When I went to college, you could not study games, and now there's 100 schools in the US alone that teach game design. And then two huge factors, which are the increasing democratization of tools. Used to be getting a game engine was basically impossible. You had to build your own from the ground up in C++ or have $100,000. You can now get Unity for free, and if you want to release, just pay a small indie developer's license every year. And Unity has changed over the past 5 years so that it's no longer just about putting games for PC, but you can do iOS, Android, Sony, and Microsoft as of later this year. And then next to all of that, and I think one of the pressures that's been also encouraging some of this other stuff to happen, is simply the fact that the mainstream game industry, to my eyes, has tapped out its extant audience. It's got a huge audience that loves your sort of big AAA genres that exist. You know, FIFA's going to sell out every year. You're going to sell out your Call of Duty and Halos. These games have no problem, but they've basically attracted everyone who's interested. So the big companies want to start having content that draws those other people in, particularly if you look at the strategies of Microsoft and Sony now. They want to be the center of your living room. They want that box to be where you watch TV, where you watch movies, how you listen to music, and also where you play together, right? And so they are really interested in putting play experiences on those consoles that appeal to the rest of the household. And I think that is where you really start to see this need for independent games, which is driving more programs teaching it, which is driving publishers to be engaged in publishing that stuff. And that also goes alongside mobile, right? So everybody's got a phone in their pocket now, and everybody's playing games, but not everybody wants to play AAA games. They want to play this other stuff. So there's more of a space for people making that different stuff to release it.
In your view, what kind of impact are you seeing indie games on in terms of the development of these AAA games? What kind of features or kind of changes that you're seeing in the AAA industry as a response to the indie games?
So I think I was talking about local multiplayer and multiplayer focus. I think there's a big shift happening in the AAA industry where there's more and more interest in reintegrating those features. In the late 2000s, there was a real, online multiplayer was a necessity and nothing else. And that's changing. People are putting local multiplayer back into their games. You're putting games that are inherently online all the time and have a sort of solo multiplayer mixed experience. You know, the growth of MMOs and stuff have really also been pushing the AAA industry to find ways where you can play these games with your friends, right? So I think of the last huge, great online multiplayer success as being the Left 4 Dead series, right? People still play tons of online Call of Duty and that kind of stuff, but Left 4 Dead was so successful because people were playing together and they could get together with friends and have this camaraderie, and it created some of this, what I think a lot of players have right now, which is this nostalgia for the couch experience. You're sitting down with your Nintendo and your 4 splitters so that you could play a big 4-player game and shout at each other, and I'm really seeing that energy come back into the AAA industry. I'm seeing a focus and an interest on having people play that way together. I also think that you do see from time to time some of the small mechanics and ideas that are being tested in the independent space come back through the AAA industry. And some of that is, sillily enough, the zombie thing. There were a lot of indie zombie games, and then all of a sudden you started having zombie modes on AAA games. Now we have huge, awesome zombie AAA games. Some of the ways that small indie games tell stories, I know, have directly influenced studios like Naughty Dog, who utilize some of that in the way that they're telling these beautiful 3D interactive narratives. And then also just purely something I would call the exploration genre, which basically was an indie-only genre. And you have Journey that just came out this last year from that game company, and some other big indie successes that are sort of like mid-tier, and those are now pushing where you're starting to see AAA experiences that focus some of their energy on allowing that or enabling that exploratory experience.
What do you think is the biggest kind of hurdle for indie games right now in terms of breaking big in the mainstream? I mean, you think of a lot of big indie games, you know, someone in the games press, like I know I can name off like a dozen, but you get outside of like the press and like the really enthusiasts, you know, it's like Minecraft, and then you kind of like, and then what's the next kind of game? How do you kind of break through and kind of get to that visibility with the consumer, especially in app markets and things like that, where you're competing against not just thousands of titles, but even sometimes tens of thousands or 100,000s of other apps and other crap like that?
I mean, so I think this is the biggest problem. It's sort of like a word that everyone's throwing around now, but discovery is what everybody is worried about, right? What we need now is better ways for people to discover the content they like and be connected with it. And I think, for instance, what we do here at IndieCade is one of those ways. If you look at the film industry, like, people discover the interesting independent films through indie film festivals. And there are film festivals that even focus on genre and things people like. So there's documentary film festivals. If you're really into documentaries, you see what played at the great doc film festivals, and those are the new docs you want to look at. There are horror film festivals. You can do the same thing. There are high-quality film festivals, Sundance, where you go for the best in independent filmmaking. So IndieCade is doing some of that. It's a place where people can go to discover some of the best of what's happening in independent games. But then you're also seeing this, Steam Greenlight was an attempt at this, an attempt to let the community vote on the games that should have attention. But it actually has turned out not to work that well, and Steam is backing away from it. But someone involved in Steam, whether it's the community or the company, is going to start looking at a way to improve that discovery. Apple and Android are deeply focused on enabling people to discover the interesting games and the ones they like. One of the things I'm excited about happening is, again, I was talking about these consoles being the center of the living room. You know, you're going to be watching movies on your Sony PlayStation 4, and like, there's very little to stop Sony if you're going through the Sony video store watching cool Sony documentaries. There's nothing to stop Sony from saying, oh, you like documentaries? Check out these documentary-like games. And I think as we start to discover, both as big companies and as festivals and as independent developers collaborating, ways to communicate that and reach the specific audiences that are interested in those games, that's when we're going to start addressing that problem.
We're kind of running out of time because they're kicking us out of the show floor. So we talk about the festival, because we've talked, you know, kind of hinted around it.
The festival is in October here in Los Angeles. At the main festival, we show 120 games. There's 36 nominees, which are the games that are eligible for awards. These are sort of the best and the brightest, the most innovative and the most different stuff. But then we have curated exhibits of digital games, board games, big games. We do night games, which is a big party where we play party-style games and things that look cool at night and are outdoorsy. And we do all of these exhibits. There's like 120 games, and that's a big public experience that everyone is welcome to. And alongside that, we have a conference for people really interested in development, talking about development issues in the development space and development community. And then we do these smaller conferences. We do something called the Indie Exchange, where we pair developers with publishers and platforms, where we do basic teaching for people just starting to develop, like, this is how you market, this is how you structure your studio, this is like basic things about planning a game development process. And we even do an introductory sort of track where people who have never made games before but want to think about it come in. It's like, these are the basics of game design. These are the basics of the tools you can use. So much of what we do at the festival is targeted on encouraging people to develop and then taking the cool games that people are developing and sharing them with the public at large. So that's a beautiful event that happens every October in Culver City, California.
Great. Thank you for your time, Sam. Much appreciated.
Thank you, guys.
Nice work,
Have
man.
a lovely day.